Welcome back to. We need to come up with like an official name for this because the BSD YouTube show just, at least in my opinion, doesn't quite hit the same. Back in the day, I had the Black Shoes Basic Podcast. I always want to say Black Shoes Basic Podcast. So maybe we'll come up with some sort of a fancy dancy name for the YouTube show. But in the meantime, welcome back to the BSD YouTube show. This is the preview show for the main event of the year, or at least of the regular season. That is the Ohio State game. Number 3 Penn State welcomes number 4 Ohio State to Beaver Stadium for the first top 5 matchup since when, Tim? I know you know this answer. You're a product of the 90s.
First top since 1999 when Penn State hosted Arizona in the kickoff classic to open the season. They ended up trouncing Arizona 41-7 in just an absolute beatdown of a game. You can find it on YouTube. But I was there. It was a lot of fun. I thought we were going to go undefeated and maybe even win the Natty after that game. And, we all know how 1999 went, for those of you old enough to recall.
Yes, went out with a whimper. But hopefully this week will be, or this Saturday will be, as you said, Penn State picked up a big win. Then against were they number 4 or number 3 Arizona? Was it reverse or was Penn State?
They were, you know what? I'm going to Google this right now because I don't remember the top.
Either way, main point being that
Arizona was number 3, Penn State was number 4. So.
Well, even with the role reversal this week, hopefully Penn State gets a win just like the guy against Arizona. And like you said, has us all thinking national championships. And hopefully this time Penn State can make through on their promise. But we will get to our preview of Ohio State here shortly. We'll go in depth on their strength, their weaknesses, the offense, the defense, and everything that you can think about. It's like I said before, this is, James Franklin is saying that this is just like any other game. He said during his media availability just earlier tonight that Bowling Green was a big game and Kent State was a big game, and et cetera, et cetera. We don't have to do coach speak. This is, the biggest game on Penn State's schedule, and certainly the biggest game because it is the next game. So we can, even if we want to go along James Franklin's little want to know, it's Saturday, it's game week. Ohio State's the most important game. Anyway, we'll get to Ohio State here in a second. First, we have practice notes. As we do every Wednesday, the media is able to go to practice, see about 10 to 15 minutes, and then they talk to James Franklin after. This practice media availability was obviously very important because the last time we talked, Drew Aller was injured. He was hurt his knee. What's really weird? Both the Solid Verbal and the Cover 3, my 2 main college football podcasts, both said an ankle, which doesn't make sense to me considering he was wearing a knee brace. I don't know how. I obviously have great respect for both of those podcasts. I've been listening to Solid Verbal since I was like literally in high school, and Cover 3 is a daily occurrence for me. So I'm surprised that they even this week continue to say the ankle. So I don't know if that was just like misinformation on their part or whatever it was. By the way, I'm pretty sure it's a knee. I think we can all agree it was a knee, considering that he was wearing a knee brace when he tried.
Yeah, my guess is if it was an ankle issue, he wouldn't be wearing like an air cast or something like that. I think they have different things for ankles, so I don't know why they. I haven't actually listened to Solid Verbal lately, but I'll have to listen to it, see what they're saying.
I believe it was Dan.
Dan Rubenstein, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with Solid Verbal. I just have to listen to the latest show they've done.
Either way, so Drew obviously has his knee injury against Wisconsin. Everyone, I'm sure, as soon as they opened the gates at media availability tonight, ran over to Drew and see how he was doing. And Tim, I don't know if you saw the videos, but I saw literally every single video that every journalist put out there, and it was all in all pretty good showing for Drew. They showed him going through some drills, running through I don't know exactly what it's called, but you run with the football and all the paddings on the side, hitting it. Really showing my football knowledge here by not knowing what that thing's called, but was going through drills. Saw him, Audrey Snyder, the great Audrey Snyder, as we can talk about last week or not talk about last week, I guess. But Audrey Snyder had a video of Drew jogging from one side of the field to the next, which was very important for at least me. Couple of videos of him throwing. So, Tim, I don't know if you did or didn't see. I imagine that you probably did see some of these videos. Takeaways from Drew. I was very much of the mind that I mentally, and maybe this is just to protect myself, did not think that he was going to play this week. And I still I don't know. I'm much more closer to 50-50. I think I still lean on the side of I just don't fully trust Penn State and James Franklin, and I don't say that in a negative way. I just like knew kind of going into this Wednesday practice availability that Franklin was going to make sure that, Drew looked like he was going to be ready to go. But if you saw the videos, kind of what were your takeaways from what we saw with him, jogging and running at practice tonight?
I was just watching it now, actually, because I hadn't really watched it before we started. But just from a quick look, I mean, he seems like he's able to move around, step into his throws some. But again, these are like practice reps. I haven't seen anyone taking actual like 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 reps, with a defense coming at him. So hard to say what his mobility is going to be like in the pocket, or when it comes decision time on whether to take off and run. We don't know how that is for him. That's the reason why he sat out in the second half against Wisconsin, because if Drew's not mobile, then he becomes more of a sitting duck for opposing defenses. So that's the last thing that Andy Kotelnicki wants in his offense from his quarterback. So we'll see. I mean, obviously, I'll take it as a game time decision, just the way it looks. But again, who knows? Maybe they already have Bo as a starter in mind. They're just not going to say it until the very last possible minute. I don't know.
What did your gut say, though? Like gun to your head, not to be too crazy here, but gun to your head. Do you think that Drew is named as a starter and is taking the first snap? And yeah, I'm sure that we will, no matter what, see Bo. But do you think that Drew plays on Saturday and is the starter?
Before I read about and watched that video, I would have said Bo was likely going to start. But seeing that, and also just thinking about the circumstances, this Drew Hour's an Ohio kid. He's probably going pro after this year. Yeah, I think he's still bothered by the loss to Ohio State last year, and he would love nothing more than to get one last crack at beating a home state school that spurned him until they came running to him at the last minute when Quinn Ewers left for Texas. So I think if he's going to try his damnedest to give it a go, and I think as long as the staff thinks he can move well enough, I think they'll give him the green light to play. So yeah, gun to my head, I think Drew starts. Does not mean I think Drew finishes the game necessarily, but given that it's Ohio State and it's he's an Ohio kid, I think Drew's gonna give it a go.
Like I said before, I think I still lean with Bo being the starter, and then thus playing the entire game. It's not like Bo's going to start and they're going to bring Drew in later.
So look, if we're playing Washington if it was reversed, we're playing Washington this week, no question, I think Bo would be your starter, and they would just give Drew a week off to get fresh for Ohio State. But that's not how it's working out.
Well, that's part of the interesting case with this compared to previous years, where this would be, in essence, a quarterfinal game, right? For Penn State, they need to beat Ohio State to win the Big Ten to make the playoffs. So if you lose to Ohio State in the previous years, all of a sudden you are completely eliminated. So this year, and I'm not trying to say the game is like meaningless, because it feels like this whole argument over if games have meaning or don't has become so black and white, where it's like it's not necessarily that. Like, this is still a massive game. I mean,
there's a whole bunch of narratives that James Franklin can. Yeah. He's already gotten rid of certain narratives already in back-to-back games with Wisconsin and USC. But you beat Ohio State on Saturday. That's another common trope against you that you're spurning.
Certainly. But again, on the other side of that is that Penn State can lose this game and can still comfortably make the playoff. They go 11-1. I know their schedule isn't exactly right. Their best win very well might be like 8-4 Illinois or something along those lines, and that's not exactly great. But Penn State's 11-1, and provided they don't get like absolutely slaughtered against Ohio State, right? As long as it's somewhat of a basically what we've seen Penn State versus Ohio State, for the last, really all of James Franklin's tenure. I think that Penn State makes it pretty comfortably at 11-1, and not only makes it pretty comfortably, but is hosting a playoff game. So not that should like necessarily really take, at least for the medical staff, it shouldn't be something that you play him this game versus not play him another game based upon, if it's a playoff game or whether, Penn State makes the playoff or not. But I do wonder, you mentioned before, and James has been talking about this too, that, it starts with medical staff. Medical staff either clears you or doesn't clear you. Once medical staff clears you, it does come down to the player if they want to play or not. That was one of the things with Nick Singleton going into that UCLA game. It seemed like he was cleared by the medical staff. He went out and he warmed up, and he did not feel comfortable playing, so thus he doesn't play. So curious what happens with Drew, because same thing last week. I mean, this is me somewhat guessing, but I'm guessing the medical staff cleared him at halftime. That's why they gave him the knee brace and had him warm up. And Drew, realized that he wasn't able to cut on it, and that he wouldn't be at his best, or at least didn't feel comfortable playing. So curious to see what happens this week. Is like you were saying before, Drew being an Ohio kid, does he put everything aside and plays, or does he? I don't want to say sees the bigger picture. It makes it seem like that he shouldn't play, but does he see the bigger picture and sit this one out and let his knee heal for another week? And granted, we don't even know what this injury is. Like I was saying before, some people are saying it's an ankle. I greatly assume that it's a knee, and we're all thinking that it's a grade 1 sprain, which if you read on the internet, which take that for what it is, can be anywhere from 3 to 4 days to almost up to 3 weeks sometimes, but generally is like a 1.5 week type deal. So I don't know. I still lean Bo, and that's partly because I'm just trying to set expectations, but I don't know. And we'll get more into Drew as we talk about the Ohio State matchup, because even though I'm leaning Bo, it's that's what makes this one so tough. It's hard to know exactly what to predict, and from Penn State's perspective, how they win, not knowing if we get Drew or if we get Bo or what percentage Drew we get. So we'll talk more about Drew's knee as we go through these previews and kind of how that could impact the game should he play. Other practice notes before we get into Ohio State. Right tackle Anthony Donko, he went down with an injury. I believe his was an ankle. He went down with an injury in the Wisconsin game, never came back. He practiced tonight as well, but I believe was limited from what I saw. Seemed more limited than Drew. Apparently, media was there for one-on-ones, and he didn't necessarily take part in one-on-ones. Nolan Rucci was the first team right tackle up there. So shout out to Tyler Donahue from 24/7, because I believe he's the one that I read the more limited from. So just want to give him a shout out. And no Denai Dennis Sutton, which I do love when fans, when we see a player has an injury and then we're like, oh, I as a fan had an injury too. Let me impart some wisdom. I have always had groin issues my entire life. Make whatever jokes you want to make out of that. It seems like Denai has a pulled groin, and those are kind of like hamstrings, can kind of linger on a little bit. So not too surprised that we didn't see any Denai Dennis Sutton tonight. Wouldn't expect him for the Ohio State game. Any takeaways on Donko or Denai Dennis Sutton, Tim?
Well, Donko, I mean, I guess we'll see. He's kind of limited in practice. I mean, I guess it doesn't bode well for Saturday, but we'll see. At least he was out there. Denai Dennis Sutton. Well, at the other hand, just because he's not there doesn't mean he's definitely not going to play Saturday. It could just be a case of, just letting him rest up and get healed, and then maybe Friday or Saturday morning he just tests it out, see how he's feeling.
It could be.
I think that'll be a game time decision for him. So who knows? Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and spend too much time speculating, but sure. I'll say Smith Bilbert and Amin Vanover did a heck of a job in his place.
Certainly. And that's part of the difference between, even offensive tackle and quarterback compared to defensive end, that maybe we see Denai for 3 or 4 snaps on, very specific situations if his groin feels good enough. So we'll see. Again, don't even fully know it's a groin. I'm just assuming, granted or given where he was pointing at and grabbing when he got hurt. All right, let's get into Ohio State everybody, I feel like this is one of our easier previews, given that Ohio State is, the number 4 team in the country. I'm sure Penn State fans have watched quite a few of their games and just generally familiar with this program that Penn State cannot get over the hump with, other than 2016. So let's talk about let's stick on the offensive side of the ball first, Tim. Let's talk about their strengths. What does Ohio State do well, or who does Ohio State have that allows them to do well? Because spoiler alert, but Ohio State's going to have a good offense. They're going to have a good defense. So what are their strengths offensively that you saw from stats and watching games and I'm sure listening to different shows all throughout the internet?
Well, offensively, that's an easy answer. It's the wide receivers. I mean, they're wide receiver U at this point with all the 5-star talent they collect year in and year out. And, Marvin Harrison Jr. is off to the NFL now as a rookie. And now you got Jeremiah Smith, true freshman sensation, taking his place. He's the team's leading receiver on the season, 623 yards, 35 catches, 8 touchdowns. But, Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate have also been doing their share of damage too. So they got a trio of solid, elite and solid receivers. I probably put them against any of, Penn State's receiving core. That's not to knock guys like Trey Wallace or Liam Clifford, Omari Evans, but Ohio State's top 3 receivers are just on another level. So they're going to be the biggest problem to deal with for Tom Allen at defense. But they also do have a pair of solid running backs, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins. Judkins, you may remember him from the Peach Bowl last December playing at Ole Miss. He's definitely more of a speedster type. You get him a crease, you get him the ball in space, and he will take off and do some real damage. Travion Henderson's a more complete back, but also definitely brings that home run hitting ability. He's more of the mold of a Nick Singleton type, if you want to do comparisons to Penn State. Now, both of those guys they've been held in check the last couple of games, especially last against Nebraska.
Say weaknesses. Just go through strengths for now.
Okay.
We'll talk.
They can run. Will Howard, he's done a good job this year at quarterback, the Kansas State transfer, 17 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He is also known for his running ability, although he hasn't done a whole lot of it this year. Not too many design runs for him, but would not be surprised if Chip Kelly, the offensive coordinator for Ohio State, throws in a few more design runs for him this weekend to try to, throw Penn State's defense off balance.
That seems to be one of the big X factors, just from listening to different podcasts and just generally speaking, when you look at Will Howard, what he was doing at Kansas State and what he's been asked to do at Ohio State, given, like you said, the wide receiver group, Jeremiah Smith, Egbuka, Carnell Tate, they really didn't need Howard to run all that much. They could keep him healthy, have him in the pocket. I'm sure even for Howard himself, a guy that wants to go to the NFL, I'm sure he wants to show off his arm a little bit more than his legs. So kind of makes sense when you have that trio of wide receivers. And everybody knows about Jeremiah Smith, but Egbuka would be, wide receiver 1 at so many different schools across the country, certainly at Penn State. And even someone like Carnell Tate, their 3rd wide receiver, certainly would be, a starter here at Penn State. And I think would certainly make a strong case to be the wide receiver 1 here at Penn State as well. They don't go deep beyond that. They do stick with Smith, Egbuka, Tate. Not that necessarily is a weakness, but just something to keep in mind that they really just go with those 3 guys. Not that they don't have talent beneath them, but they ride those 3 guys basically all the way through.
That's all they need.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's probably all they need, really.
No, exactly. Something works, don't break it, or don't try to fix it. Hit the nail on the head with the running backs. Travion Henderson, I'm sure, is going to have, it feels like every time he plays Penn State, he has, one just massive 50-yard run or something. Did not play last year, was injured last year. Same with Egbuka. So we'll see both those guys back this time around, and both those guys had big games last time they were in Beaver Stadium. Will Howard. Let's talk about Will Howard, and we can kind of transition into the weaknesses, because not to say that Will Howard is a weakness, but you did mention his lack of wanting to run, and that can we can talk about Ohio State's offensive line, because although if you look at you look at stats, and to be clear, Ohio State is they're a juggernaut. There's very, very few holes here. So when we say weaknesses, it's weaknesses on like a top 5 level. Like where could Penn State have some advantages, or where does Ohio State maybe just a little bit of a weakness?
Or like where Penn State can expose them, and in a presumably tight game, it's going to be one on the margins. Where can they get an advantage? That's more what we mean by weaknesses, I think.
Yeah, certainly. So Ohio State is without its left tackle, Josh Simmons, who was a transfer from San Diego State a couple years ago, has really come into his own. While with the Buckeyes, probably was going to be a first, second, maybe a third round pick. Had a season-ending injury against Oregon, and they had to go to their backup left tackle last game against Nebraska. I believe you pronounce his name
Michalski.
Yeah, Michalski, something along those lines. Don't know how to pronounce it. But either way, he also got carted off against Nebraska. Now, it doesn't seem like a season-ending injury per se, at least from what I saw around the internet. But if someone gets carted off the field, it's kind of tough to imagine that they will be able to play the next week. So we'll see. If that is the case, if they're going on to their third string left tackle, it seems like what they'll be doing is that they'll be bringing in Donovan Jackson, who is their left guard, moving him out to left tackle. Very good left guard, but ideally you're not moving your guards to tackle. So it'd be Donovan Jackson at left tackle, having a true sophomore, Luke Montgomery, come in at left guard, and all of a sudden you kind of have this mismatch of an offensive line for Ohio State that, although I wouldn't say that they struggle running the ball, they have at least looked a little bit more human the last couple of weeks. Just taking a look at my notes here real quick. Where do I have it down? They did okay against Oregon, averaged around 4 yards per carry, but against Nebraska, they only averaged in the 2 area. So really struggled to run the ball against Nebraska, and shocker, but this is going to be a really big point for Penn State. Can they stop the run against Ohio State? Because with Chip Kelly as their offensive coordinator, what do they want to do? What does any really good offensive coordinator, other than Lincoln Riley, apparently want to do is run the football. So is Penn State going to be able to stop the run and slow down Judkins and Henderson, given Ohio State's offensive line troubles? I think that's probably the biggest question for Penn State. Or, like we mentioned, Tim, you do X factors. I think that is probably going to be one of your X factors is how does Penn State slow down the run? Because if you slow down the run, all of a sudden that's going to really help everything else for Penn State.
Well, Penn State's, I've said this before, but Penn State's defense thrives on feasts on one-dimensional teams. So if you can make them one-dimensional, take away the run game and start teeing off a bit more on Will Howard. Now, Will Howard's much more mobile than Braden Locke, mind you, but he's still a guy that they could some pressure on him could potentially cause problems.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was, just listening to Urban Meyer. I saw him on my Twitter timeline talking about what he would do to kind of fix Ohio State's run game, given their struggles against, given their struggles against Nebraska. And like so many people are saying, Howard needs to get involved in run game. If he's going to, start keeping some of these, all of a sudden that's basically works as an extra blocker. Because even if he's showing the threat of keeping them later in the game when he's, maybe not looking to keep it as much, and you can allow Henderson and Judkins to do their work. Just having Abdul Carter or having Smith Bilber, or who's ever in a defensive end, just have to think for a split second that Will Howard's going to keep it. That essentially acts as a second blocker. So basically ringing true to what everybody else has said, I fully do expect to see that we see Will Howard run the ball much more than we have. I think at this point, the most rushes that he has in one game is like 8 or 9, maybe 10 times. So I would not be surprised if that's up in the 12, 13, almost into the 15 area, just because it seems that offense, given their offensive line struggles and the injuries, they are going to kind of have to their season is on the line. If Ohio State loses, I won't say it's a 0% chance that they make the playoff, but it is much, much lower. No kidding. If they lose this game, so there's no keeping Will Howard healthy or trying to take hits away from him. Especially
there's zero margin for error going forward for Ohio State. Like I think 10-2. If they were to lose, I think they still would probably get in. I say that because they're Ohio State, and I think the playoff committee look for any excuse to put them in. So I still think a 10-2 Ohio State gets in, but like there's going to be no margin, no room for error whatsoever if Penn State beats them this weekend. But, didn't mean to talk about Ohio State's playoff prospects on this show.
Any other weaknesses offensively? I mean, we said, running back, wide receiver, or their general strength. Jeremiah Smith is just an absolute.
Tight end they don't involve him too much in the passing attack. Geese Scott Jr. Like he's fine, catches passes, move the chains, but he's no one's mistaken him for Tyler Warren.
Yeah, or even Cade Stover. Cade Stover is the guy that gave Penn State problems at what it felt like for like 7 years. He's one of those guys that just would never leave. So, yeah, don't use the tight end as much, but again, when you have Jeremiah Smith and Ibuka and Carnell Tate, you don't really need to. Just sticking with their strengths, I think, goes without saying. One of the big things that Penn State needs to do, and something that has been a hallmark of James Franklin defenses since he's been here, has been limiting the big play. And I say limit very purposely because Jeremiah Smith is going to have a big play. Ibuka is going to have a big play. They're going to take shots deep to those guys, and Jeremiah Smith in particular. It feels like every time I watch Ohio State broadcast, I feel like it's always Joel Klatt calling the games. Joel Klatt will say how they need to get Jeremiah Smith involved, and all of a sudden, 45 yards down the field area is making a big play. So I think it's limiting as much as you can with him, but also realizing that he is probably going to have a big play, but it's a matter of making sure that those plays aren't touchdowns and that, you tackle downfield well, you tackle in open space well, because
it's going to be very bend, but don't break that.
What?
It's going to be very bend, but don't break.
Yes.
That's going to be what they're going. Tom Allen's going to go for. Just keep everything in front of them. Don't get beat over the top by those bevy of receivers. Like I said, make sure you're making the tackles in space. Don't allow a 5 or 10 yard catch to turn into double that much. Things like that. And of course, keep the run game in check. Like I said, maybe Trevor Henderson busts off a huge one. He always seems to do one of those, but just make sure that one doesn't go to the end zone. When they do get into, and they will get in the red zone, I'm sure, but hold them to a field goal attempt. Their kicker's actually been kind of shaky from what I've read this season. I don't think he's made a kick outside of, or it's been very shaky outside of 40 yards. So if you can, put them kind of like in a, sort of like where they're maybe in a fourth down and mid situation around a 25 or so, between 25 and 30, maybe you force them to go for it instead of trying a long field goal, since their kicker hasn't been reliable from too far.
Just going back to open field tackling, making sure that you keep a 15-yard or 20-yard catch, just that and nothing more. I've been watching previous Penn State, Ohio State installments because I don't know, I guess I just hate myself or something. And I was watching the 2018 game, which if you watch that first half, it's like, I have no idea how Penn State lost that game. They were playing so well defensively and other than some drops.
We didn't put up enough points to show for it. And that was, they should have been up like 20-0 at halftime.
But they were up 26 to 14, and they allow this kind of broken play. Benjamin Victor makes a weird catch, and some Penn State defenders just get caught up, and he's able to get to the end zone instead of draining clock. Ohio State's able to score quickly, and from there it became a real ball game that Penn State obviously loses, and I still am upset about it. But on to this week, on to the Saturday. Tim, let's move over to the defense because I think we're pretty caught up with the offense. It's great skill position players. All in all, pretty good quarterback. Will Howard, he grew up Penn State fans. So obviously, he's a good quarterback. That's all we do is just Penn State fans are good quarterbacks. But some shaky offensive line play. So big key for Penn State is Abdul Carter and just generally defensive line, like you said, kind of limiting those big plays where you can. What are some of Ohio State's strengths defensively? Where is Penn State's offense going to have some problems? Once again, not knowing who's going to be there at quarterback for Penn State.
I'd say the secondary is probably Ohio State's biggest strength defensively. They don't give up much in terms of explosive pass plays, so it's going to be very obviously. Andy Kolenicki, I'm sure will draw. I guess the good thing about Penn State is they haven't they haven't relied too much on deep balls. This isn't like the Joe Moorhead system where there was a lot of 50-50 YOLO balls getting thrown up, but explosive pass plays in Kolnick's offense seem to be more from the intermediate range, so like the 15, 20, 25-yard type pass plays. So those might be more available. Like you're probably not. I can't envision anyone like beating maybe Omari, but that's a big if. Like beating Ohio State over the top. You got guys like Denzel Burke back there, and Caleb Downs, the Alabama transfer at safety, has been solid for them. Another key, Lathan Ransom, who was dealing with an injury. It sounds like, based on the practice reports according to Ohio State's 24/7 site, he's going to be available Saturday. So that's a boon to Ohio State's secondary. Cody's, so they've they've got some guys in the secondary. I think their D line too can be problematic, and I'm talking about one, Mr. JT Tuimoloau, who I'm sure I triggered some PTSD for some people watching this. If you remember a couple years ago, he was a one-man wrecking ball in the fourth quarter and almost single-handedly helped Ohio State put away a tight game and go on to win by a couple of scores, a couple touchdowns. So, he'll be an issue. Jack Sawyer also manning that D line. So, they've got some guys in that D line. And I mean, Penn State's offensive line, to their credit, has played fairly well this year. They've had some issues here and there, but nothing real debilitating. Of course, that goes back to that news about Anthony Donko, or just the practice report on Donko. And, if he's not able to give it a go Saturday, then, things could get a bit dicey on the O-line. It's going to be up to, some guys to step up, like Nolan Rucci and others coming off the bench. So that's another group to look out for. I'd say the D-line secondaries are best part by far, and D-line probably comes in a close second. So going to be very important for Penn State's offensive line to, keep, to make sure the D-line themselves don't push them around. If Ohio State's going to get pressure on Bo or Drew, whoever's back there, quarterback, make them have to, blitz a linebacker or blitz a safety in order to do that. So just don't let the D-line dictate things for the offense. So that's going to be a big key. Like the trench warfare, I guess, is what I'm getting to.
Yeah, certainly easier said than done. It's just like the rest of Ohio State's team, to be honest with you, just filled with day one, day two prospects, Jack Sawyer and JTT and Ty Hamilton and Tyleik Williams on the defensive line. All four of those guys, I would wager pretty good money you're going to be picked in the first, second, or third rounds. And I mean, yeah, like just like you said, like there's really no major weakness there. Like even listening to shows, some of the talk about like Ohio State secondary being a potential weakness just because they did struggle a little bit, or I shouldn't say they struggled a little bit. They struggled against Oregon. I don't know if Penn State has the Oregon wide receiver group. There is no Tej Johnson or Evan Stewart that can, I don't know, consistently win on those one-on-one battles against, like you said, Denzel Burke and those guys back there. So
they do have Tyler Warren, though.
Yes, we'll get to that in a second. But just as far as like watching that Oregon game and being like, what can Penn State do? I don't know if those one-on-one matchups outside, really having a ton of faith in Penn State's wide receivers versus those Ohio State's cornerbacks is going to work out as well as it did for Oregon. Granted, I do think that there should be some shots taken deep, and particularly to start the game. If you remember back against Iowa 2009, Penn State took that shot deep right in the beginning, hit Chaz Powell, and Penn State ended up losing the game. But I wouldn't mind one of those because it just, as everybody knows, Penn State has been such a slow starter, even offensively in the first quarter of games, that instead of coming out and just running the ball up the middle, and this is dependent upon if Bo or Drew plays, but instead of running the ball up the middle or doing something to Tyler Warren in the flat or something along those lines, I really wouldn't be opposed to seeing if you can get Amari Evans one-on-one and just see if you can hit him deep and try to punch Ohio State right away. Because what will most likely be Ohio State's game plan, whether certainly if it's Bo, but even if it's Drew, is make Penn State beat you by throwing, right? Make Trey Wallace and Lehman Clifford and Julian Fleming and Tyler Warren lose to those guys rather than losing to a Penn State team that obviously wants to run the ball. So we've seen a lot of Caleb Downs just back playing deep safety. He does a great job at that. I wonder if, and we'll see how the game goes, if Ohio State starts to come forward like they were last year. They were playing a lot of, zero deep and trying to have Penn State beat them, and Penn State wasn't able to beat them deep. So I wonder if that's something that Kolnicki tries to go to early in the game to kind of set the pace that Penn State is going to take shots if those are there.
Make Ohio State have to respect it, which
Yeah.
in turn could open things up for the run, because then they can't just zero in on the run. And
yeah, I mean it's easier said than done, right? Just
right.
Take a shot deep, and it's something that may or may not work out. But
I'm really excited to see what the big Zamboni draws up to try and get Ohio State's defense off its game.
Yeah, I mean, they're certainly going to have to find ways to scheme more and open. We haven't mentioned Ohio State's linebackers, but good linebacker play as well with Cody Simon. Yeah, really, really good linebacker. So there is no, same with the offense. I mean, I think offensive line is more of a issue for them just given their injuries, but this Ohio State defense, yes, they can give up points, and yes, they can be beat. Certainly not saying that this is, 2011 Alabama defense or something crazy like that, but they are stacked up. I think it comes down for me two things. One, like I was saying before, even though Penn State doesn't have Oregon's receivers and they're not going to be able to consistently win that way, you're going to have some catches. Like, you're going to have to win some one-on-one battles and generate some big plays. I don't know if Penn State's going to be able to, dink and dunk their way down the field that they have been at times against other teams. Secondly, as good as that Ohio State defensive line is, like I said, all for second, maybe third round picks, they do not rotate. And Ryan Day this week has mentioned, and he said this in the past though, but he mentioned that they need to do a better job of rotating to keep those guys fresh. If they're just going to play Sawyer and JTT and Hamilton and Williams the entire game, Penn State needs to stay committed to the run. Because that was one thing that we did not see from Yurcich last year was, Penn State goes down and all of a sudden Drew Allure is throwing, upwards of 40 times when he hadn't.
He abandoned the run too quickly.
Yeah.
It was definitely, even with last year's, run game. I mean, even that was getting some success against Ohio State. So, I mean, I don't see why they can't do it this year. I mean, it's not like Ohio State's become like a team that just completely swallows up run games. I'm looking at Oregon's stat line here when they went against them. Jordan James, 23 carries, 115 yards, and a touchdown. And then, of course, Dylan Gabriel, running quarterback, has 4 carries for 32 yards and a touchdown. So, you can imagine, especially if Perbula, and I'm sure Perbula will take some snaps in the center, whether it's as the full-time starter or whether it's just in a bow package, whatever. But he having another running threat in the backfield to go with your running backs can open up things for the ground game too. And that's where Ohio State defense can be had, it seems.
Yeah, and a lot of they're ranked number 1 in the Big Ten in rushing yards per carry. But the only thing I will say, once again, I feel like I have to preface everything with preface everything with, I know Ohio State's really good. Not trying to say that they aren't, but a lot of those stats are based upon Marshall and based upon Akron and based upon teams like that. Against Iowa, 4.3 yards per carry. Against Oregon, 5 yards per carry. And Nebraska was averaging 3.67. None of those are great. Okay, Oregon's might be pretty good. 5 in particular. Penn State runs for 5 yards per carry. I'm pretty confident that Penn State wins. But 3.67 yards per carry and 4.3 yards per carry isn't necessarily a winning recipe for Penn State, but it at least shows that teams are able to somewhat run them, right? If you watch that Nebraska-Ohio State game, it wasn't that Nebraska was completely unable to run the ball. They had their chunk plays. They had some, 10-plus yard carries. And if Raiola is a little bit better, which, he's only a freshman, so I understand, maybe that's something that can open up more. So once again, tough to know when it's Bo versus Drew and not knowing what we're going to get. I think that we all feel a little bit more confident if Drew is out there, right, Tim? I'm not wrong in saying that from your perspective. Do we get frozen, Tim? Oh, he's back. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I think we got.
Oh, there we go. We're back.
Yeah.
I was just saying that I think we'd all be more confident in Drew versus Bo, at least from a throwing perspective. But on the optimistic side with Bo, I don't know if I'm just trying to think off the top of my head if they have faced a running quarterback like Bo. Not that Bo is circa Mike Vick, 2000, but certainly gives Penn State a little bit more, as we were talking before, like the whole like extra blocker thing with your quarterback being able to keep the ball. Bo certainly does that, which, sorry, just now I'm rambling on because I'm just thinking everything.
It's like Dylan Gabriel's kind of a runner, isn't?
He doesn't run a whole lot. Yeah. He had the touchdown running against Ohio State, but that accounted for I think like 90. He only ran for like 28 yards, something like that against Ohio State. He certainly.
I know Dylan Raiola busted off a big run on them. Actually ran it 9 times, 31, but. And that includes sacks, of course, but he busted off a 38-yard run. So
that was on a pass, though. I mean, as far as like,
it's on a broken play, but just
I more so mean RPOs within the run game. It's something that Ohio State.
Yeah, they probably haven't dealt too much with that. I mean, I'm not sure how much RPO they were running with at Oregon. I don't recall off the top of my head.
But case in point with Dylan Gabriel, though, what he scored on, what happened was it was, a RPO that he could pull back. JTT crashes in way too hard on the running back, thinking that Gabriel's not going to keep it. Gabriel takes it and scampers into the end zone. So even if Drew does play, and that's going to be a big part of if his knee is healthy enough, can he make those cuts and stuff like that? The same way that we saw Sean Clifford in 2022 against Michigan, right? He keeps that and runs for 60 yards. I think that there can be plays like that for Drew. So that's just to throw some more confusion into all of this. Like, yes, Drew's game isn't running, and I don't expect him to run, like we were saying before, like Will Howard 12 to 15 times, but his knee does need to be healthy enough to want to run, not to be afraid to run. So I'm just going on and on. Anything else? Ohio State weakness, strengths, defensively, offensively that we didn't hit before we get to score predictions, Tim?
I think we've about hit on him from what I can tell.
All right, go ahead. Score prediction.
So as it said before we hit record, I've been waffling. You and I both, I think, been waffling back and forth on who we're going to pick. I know both of us preseason had this Sharpied as a loss, but the way his season has gone, and especially the way the last 2 games have gone, really gave me some pause. This feels like a team that might be destined for a special type of season. And I feel like the common theme in all the special seasons, 2016, 2008, 2005, 1994, all of them won the Big Ten title. All those years they beat Ohio State. And you know what? To quote a famous fictional Pennsylvanian, I guess to paraphrase a famous fictional Pennsylvanian, no doubt about it, I'm ready to be hurt again. I'm taking Penn State in a lower scoring rock fight of a contest, 20-17.
I thought you were with Rocky for a second, so the Oscar reference. Moving for a loop. No doubt about it, I'm ready to be hurt again. I think that is very fitting because I am not going to do that. I'm going with Ohio State. This entire week, that is what I've been thinking. Do not let yourself talk yourself into this stupid Penn State team because they will hurt you. And I don't know if I mentioned this on the live broadcast, but we'll mention it while we've been live. But I will be at the game now. I've secured tickets, so I will not be on shirtless. The post game show. My apologies. I'll be on shirtless at some other point. Maybe I'll make an appearance. We'll see how Wi-Fi is at Beaver Stadium. But I will be at the game. I cannot imagine a scenario of Penn State winning this game.
That's what I told myself in 2016, Pat. Look what happened. So
true. Now, all jokes aside, I do have Ohio State winning this game. I have it. Did you give a score?
I said 20-17 Penn State.
20-17. Okay. I have 24-18. Do think it will be on the lower side. Once again, tough to fully know if Drew plays, how healthy Drew is, what type of Drew you get, if Bo plays, that whole thing. I just you look at this Ohio State team and you watch.
Dan here speaks the truth, Pat.
If
you didn't believe, you wouldn't buy the tickets.
Hello, Dan. Dan's a friend of mine. If you watch that Oregon game and like how close it was, and granted, Oregon made some mistakes, but it just feels like it's going to take, just some massive, massive plays offensively for Penn State to score consistently on this Ohio State team, or consistently enough to win. And just the questions with Drew, what type of Drew you're going to get. And I don't know, as much faith as I have in Tyler Warren being a dude, and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And I do believe, part of me believes in the prophecy of Julian Fleming. I think we get a touchdown. I hope we get a touchdown. Like, that would just be the greatest thing in the world. I just don't know if Penn State quite has the athletes on the outside to make the plays necessary. Because in any Penn State game that they beat Ohio State, there needs to be some big plays. I just don't know if we're going to get that. So,
you know what, Pat? If we had a Jahan Dotson or a Chris Godwin or a KJ Hamler at receiver,
a Parker Washington,
wouldn't have had too much waffling. I would have picked Penn State like from the get-go.
Yeah.
Instead of doing this waffling in my head.
No, just one other guy. And I don't even mean as much as I think the wide receivers are.
Shout out to our pal Lando, our colleague watching tonight. Thank you,
Lando, for being with me. I think Penn State's wide receivers are improved from last year. Like, I think Trey Wallace is pretty underrated, like, nationally, because a lot of the talk on podcasts is that Penn State's wide receivers are still poor, and I don't fully believe that. But I just don't know if they're at the point that they can beat Ohio State. And in a game between two really, really good teams, something like that can swing it. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm also like just a little burned from all these previous years. Like, last year I was so confident that Penn State was going to win. Ohio State had offensive line troubles last year, and Penn State had Adisa Isaac and Chop Robinson, and you go on, and they just weren't able to fully impact the game that we all hoped for. And Chop ended up getting hurt in that game as well. So I'm kind of in, as we said in the beginning of the season, like, believe it when you see it mode, and that's just kind of where we're at. But
I think to me, it's just I've already seen this team win a couple back-to-back games that years past they would have lost. I mean, to come back from 14 down on the road at USC, and say what you about their record. It's not because they suck. I mean, they just have problems of closing out games in the fourth quarter. But that was a huge road win at USC to be down 14. To come back and ultimately win that game the way they did, that was really impressive. And then you go on the road again at Wisconsin in a game that's, a little more troublesome than you thought, and your starting quarterback goes down, and now here's your backup having to play full time. You don't know how it's going to. I mean, I remember in the Slack chat, we're all talking about we're having Iowa 2021 visions all over again with, Bo back there, but. To his credit and to, Andy Kolnicki's credit, they got that offense rolling eventually. I mean, I do think the pick six really lit a spark in them, but they did, even those first two drives of Bo where they had the punt, they still were able to make some plays. You kind of saw it was more Bo just getting into the rhythm of things. And once he got into a rhythm and he was able to, start rolling. So, I just feel like Coach K is going to he's going to come up with some ways to move the ball enough on Ohio State to And I think Tom Allen, that defense, they'll bend, they won't break. I just think they just find a way to pull this one out. You know what? It's been 8 goddamn years. We're overdue for a win. Why not now?
We need to get a couple more things. Just as I'm just sitting here, need to get off to a better start defensively. I cannot go down 10-0 or 7-3 or anything. Like,
absolutely
need to start off on the right foot, get the crowd going. Other thing, Ohio State playing at Oregon, don't like that. Like that, coming into this atmosphere, not that it's an easy atmosphere to play in, but being at Oregon, which is conservatively a top 10 atmosphere, not top 5
pretty raucous environment. I mean, Autzon's up there with Beaver Stadium in terms of loudness. So
I think that means something, that going into that environment, and even though they didn't win, but being familiar playing in that type of atmosphere and now coming to Beaver Stadium, I think that type of stuff matters. So, yeah, I need to be smart. I need to protect myself, and I am going with Ohio State. And once again, like, I know I keep saying once again, but once again, I don't want to say it's no big deal if they lose, but you go 11-1. That's really all I ask for this season. And you make the playoff, host a home playoff game, and take things from there. So at the very least, it's not a killer like it has been in previous seasons, but I'll be honest, I will cry if Penn State wins. There's a decent chance. I'm at least tearing up for sure, especially with being in the stands. So just fair warning for that. But if they lose, also no big deal. Spin zone, we'll be able to spin zone it. Drew wasn't healthy, meaningless anyway. I didn't even want to play in the Big Ten title game. I want hosting a home playoff games way better than getting.
Oh, yeah, we want that home Beaver Stadium playoff game anyway. So
yeah. So all right. So you have 2017. I have 24. You have 2017 Penn State. I have 24-18 Ohio State. This is our first time disagreeing because neither of us have actually picked against.
So Ryan Barker kicked 6 field goals. That's what you're predicting.
I just always pick random. I sometimes just throw out random numbers, like
origami-ish. I like it.
Yeah. So, because I feel like everybody just goes right 24-17.
I said 30-16 last week for Wisconsin, which was a bit unique, and actually the final score wasn't too far off for either team.
Yeah, I had 27-13 last week, so I was literally even closer. So we will see. All right. We will be back. Well, Tim will be back with a TBD BSD on Saturday afternoon. Like I said, I'll see what my Wi-Fi situation's like, and maybe I'll try to call in live from the stadium. So you might see me on Saturday.
Yeah, just one more programming note. We're at 117 subscribers right now. Thank you to all who have subscribed, and I promise we will get a shirtless Pat show at some point for you. Woo! Teasing it. This isn't the shirtless show, but no, we're gonna get that for a full show at maybe for the Washington game, Pat, or
yeah. I mean, honestly, like I'm saying, I might call in after the Ohio State game, and there's no promises what I have on. If Penn State wins, it might be more than just a shirtless show, Tim. Just we have to change that old age restriction on YouTube to rated R. Just gonna give you a heads up. All right. Let's get out of here. I got to watch Yankees. I missed an Aaron Judge home run. Just unbelievable. Bad timing. So we will see you guys on Saturday. Penn State freaking win. Come on. Let's do it. Finally. Let's go.